I would like to now introduce our next topic and panel, and that is emotional intelligence plus digital intelligence. Thoughts into action. Emotional intelligence and digital intelligence come together, causing this idea that thoughts are into action. We must, you must, but do what? What will it take to back our market share, grow our impact, and bring our members to our CUSO? So to continue the conversation, it is showtime. We need to have our innovation take a path that we can take us into the future. So I have some experts to bring up here in the panel. On the emotional intelligence side, first we have Becky Reed, a focus on emotional intelligence. She's the president and CEO of Lone Star Credit Union. Next, we have Chad Ritchie, the CIO of Ventura County Credit Union. And as he comes up on the digital intelligence side, first we have George Estrada, who is the principal strategist for AWS, Amazon Web Services. And finally, we have Ed Chang. He's the EVP and CIO of Logix Federal Credit Union. So we're going to start with Becky and then over to George and back and forth. And if you guys would do me one favor, as people ask questions, if I happen to not be able to jog fast enough to them, will you repeat their question into the mic? Sure. Excellent. All right, take us away.
I get to start? Yes? Okay, so many of you, and I have prepared remarks, sorry, I tend to ad-lib and I absolutely will forget what I wrote down and go off the rails. So I'm going to read my prepared remarks. For those of you that know me, you're probably surprised that I would choose the emotional intelligence side of the table. I am a technologist and I have a reputation for embracing technology solutions. So, technology, however, is only as good as the person using it. Digital intelligence is important, certainly, for providing data and tools to people. However, data can't provide insight. That requires human interpretation. Technology can provide trend analysis, but it can't create a strategic vision. Data doesn't brainstorm. Data doesn't collaborate. Data doesn't inspire. Emotionally intelligent leaders use technology-driven data to inspire people to act. It's humans that create connections, culture, and vision. Digital intelligence is important, but it's the people that ultimately decide how best to utilize it.
Great, great opening, and George Estrada, AWS. The position I'm taking is that we need to raise our digital IQ. The leadership team needs to raise a digital IQ. And what that means is that we need to demystify technology. We need to bring other stakeholders. As a former CIO and CTO, the challenge that IT faces for the most part is that most of their peers are not as engaged. They come in and they say, we need to be a data-driven organization. And then you say, okay, so what does that mean to you? And they're like, well, you figure it out, right? And so it is important to raise the digital IQ from the CFO down to the CMO. And the reason for that is that there's real implications, there are real numbers. MIT did some research and found that organizations across the board that had 3 or more leadership leaders that were digitally savvy, and they defined digitally savvy as someone who knows what the impact of technology on their line of business could be. They found that 3 or more leaders in a leadership team can almost double not only their efficiency and their productivity, but also 15% higher profits against their competitors. And that's real numbers. And they found that organizations like that tended to go from command and control leadership teams down to coach and advise teams. So they included across the board stakeholders, whether it was someone from the call center all the way up to the CEO. So the change in thinking, the demystification that happens by raising a digital IQ is that you no longer look at this as IT's job. You look at this as something that the leadership team has to own and understand. So I think the importance on raising the digital IQ is critical for the sake of the survival of businesses across the board.
Hi, Chad Ritchie, CIO, Ventura County Credit Union. I have a disclaimer. Corey, a board member of mine, is in the audience today. I still believe in digital intelligence, I promise. But I'm going to take the emotional intelligence side. While I like George's argument, I believe that the focus needs to be on outcomes. As a CIO, my job is to deliver information securely, at speed, that can scale. At the end of the day, that's what I'm just making sure stuff needs, wherever it needs to go, it's getting there in the right way, and the information is consumable by the people in the business lines. And it's really about the employees and the members that we have to focus on those outcomes. What are the outcomes that they're getting from technology? And we have to be emotionally intelligent to understand that. It's not about whether I use AWS or Azure. Nothing personal, George. It's not about those kinds of decisions. While those are important, at the end of the day, what we need to be thinking about is, what is the member going to feel when they're interacting with this? If they decide to go through a digital channel and then step off to a physical channel and then they want to get back on to a digital channel, that's great. But how do they feel about that process? If that's painful, if that causes friction, if that causes them frustration at any point, as technologists, we haven't done our job right. So we have to focus on the emotional piece of this from the member and the employee's perspective. The same thing goes for our employees. If they're dealing with the technology and it's painful or they can't use it, who cares what stack it is? At the end of the day, they're frustrated, and when they're interacting with our members can be frustrated through that. So we have to take care to make sure that as we're developing these solutions, that we're taking into account everything at the executive level throughout the organization. We're having these conversations. It's not just about the technology. It's about the emotions that we're creating in our members when they're using these tools.
Well, Chad, I respectfully disagree. Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Chuang. I'm the CIO of Logix Federal Credit Union, $9.5 billion. I feel that oftentimes as credit unions, when we talk about digital, we fall into a trap, and we talk about digital with a lowercase d. And that's digital as a project, maybe as a department. And we love to compare digital as a channel with the branches or the contact center. But if you think about the other way of thinking about digital, you just have to, the digital with a capital D, you just have to look at the language that Chase uses and how they're reaching out to millions of Gen Z users that they're winning over, right? So digital is about aspiration. It's a lifestyle. Digital is about letting someone flash a QR code so they can enhance their travel experience by entering a lounge. Digital is about being able to bid on curated dining experiences with a celebrity chef, right? Digital is about the 25-year-old female startup founder that's trying to balance her life, productivity, her family, oftentimes through just the phone, right? So that's digital with a capital D. You juxtapose that with the language that we often still use. So I hopped into my rental car last night and I heard a radio commercial of a local federal credit union. And they were talking about digital as a convenience so that they could bring in deposits. These are decades-old terminology and it really doesn't resonate with the Gen Zs of today. So since we're in Vegas, I'll end with saying that I'll wager that most everyone, if not everyone in this room, has a cell phone. And we know the importance of that cell phone to us. You see it as you log into Marriott Bonvoy to check into your room and get a digital key. You see that when you get your boarding pass through the Southwest app. And here we are at a credit union conference, and we're debating as if it's still a debate whether or not digital should be the center of our business. That's my position.
I just want to say that every single one of these guys talked about people using technology. And so that proves my point that it's really all about the people. Certainly, technology can move our initiatives forward. It can make our lives easier. But credit unions are in the business of people, ultimately. And there's something that I say quite often, and that is our employees require a frictionless experience in order to provide our members with a frictionless experience. And the mechanism by which we create less friction is technology, but ultimately it's about the people. So thanks for all talking about people. Prove my point.
So look, I think the emotional intelligence part is very important. I think that's why you need the digital IQ raise, because that conversation, when you get that first cloud bill, becomes very emotional very quickly, right? Very quickly. And so understanding what kind of questions to ask before you start making those investments, before you start migrating, understanding, oh, we have to develop a new practice around cloud economics, and it's not just finance, it's IT, it's the developers, it's the partners, right? Understanding those questions and what needs to happen starts feeding into that emotional intelligence part, right? So I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. What I find frustrating, and I've seen this as I was a CTO for a managed service provider, and I see this in my present role, is that the difference, I know the difference in the IQ level of, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, like in the technical IQ level or sophistication of a leadership team, when the only person that I could meet is a CIO or the CTO. CFO has no interest in meeting with me. COO has no interest in meeting with me. CEO has no interest. On the other hand, conversely, there are organizations and credit unions in particular, that's my area of focus, where the CEO wants to meet with me, wants me to meet with the leadership team, right? There's a confidence level, right? Because they have questions that they want to ask me directly or ask my team directly. And that's where you start seeing that confidence, right? They're not worried. They got Chad to worry about securing the environment and asking those particular questions. But when it comes to what programs do you offer? I mean, AWS offers a lot of programs around digital strategy, innovation, right? Those are things that the leadership team needs to, they find real value. So I think that's where the digital IQ really starts helping on the emotional side.
Yeah, I agree with you, George, and Ed as well. I think that when we're looking at the emotional intelligence piece, what we have to consider is, as we said, sometimes it's considered technology's job to figure this stuff out. Like, hey, that's the CIO's job, that's the CTO's job, go figure this stuff out. And that's where it becomes a leadership issue. If the leadership in whole isn't embracing digital from an emotionally intelligent perspective of outcomes and feelings of members and employees, then that's where the first potential misstep can happen. We're at a point now in time where digital is no longer just one executive's purview of ownership. While they may have the responsibility for maintaining it and growing it, but it's certainly not theirs. It has to be a collective amongst the leadership. It has to be everybody feels a part of this, because at the end of the day, a lot of our members are choosing to do business that way. And it's just as relevant as if you wanted somebody in the branches. You have people who look over the branches, but again, everybody in the leadership team is having a say in how we're developing our branch strategy. That's not just the decision of a COO. It's an executive decision, and you have to have that leadership from the beginning. So having that emotionally intelligent conversation about the why. So why you have your digital, you have your Marriott Envoy, is that what it's called? Bonvoy, thank you. You have your digital key. Why do you have your digital key? You have your digital key to make it easier for people to check in, because standing in line is frustrating and people don't want to do that when they get to a hotel. I don't want to stand in line with 50 people. People. Can we get a clap on the people? People. Thank you.
On the topic of leadership, I really want to double down on what Chad just said. One of the things I see across many credit unions is that when it comes to the topic of digital, there's still just one voice in the room. It's typically a room full of leadership that has a lot of operational experience, maybe with branches or as ex-CFOs, and you have one person trying to push the digital initiative forward. And oftentimes they're saying those words, but they're saying it to boards that won't even turn on their camera at Zoom meetings, right? So there's a disconnect between wanting to do something and then every so often throwing out Amazon as an example, but then just really not meaningfully pushing the envelope forward.
Do we have questions from the group?
All right, hit us up.
Thank you for that, Sid, Singh from Boulder Money. I love the focus on people, because at the end of the day, technology is in service of ensuring that the consumer gets what they actually need. So given that tech has become, and digital has become table stakes, whether it's apps, whether it's ChatGPT 4 in a few years, I guess the question I have to ask is, in a world where 70% of fintech apps get deleted within 24 hours, just having tech alone isn't going to be sufficient. So how do credit unions truly differentiate themselves in getting outcomes for their members?
I can start. This is where CUSOs come in, and creating an ecosystem of the right partners makes sense. So as a credit union, first and foremost, you have to decide what you are and who you are, right? To your point, you don't just go out and buy a bunch of technology and hope and pray that it works and that there's ROI and there's adoption. You have to know who your members are, who you're serving, and your end goal. And then we're at a point in time where CUSOs and technology are so advanced that you can really partner with the right people, even with a small team internally, and launch the experience that you want.
So as the CEO of a credit union, I can tell you that I was shocked at the speed at which SVB had a run on its deposits. 36 hours, $60 billion went out. And there was a comment made in the previous panel about the environment that we're in, right? Many of us in our lifetimes, and certainly in our credit union careers, have not seen an environment like what we're having today. And we have spent a lot of money making the digital experience for our members easy. That's why you saw it was really easy for customers of SVB to move money out rapidly, right? What we haven't done, and this requires emotional intelligence and digital intelligence, is making our back-end processes as swift as our front-end processes for our members. We've spent a lot of investment dollars and time in the front-end experience for our members, making things easy, and now it's time to use our emotional intelligence to make things easier for our employees. So we talked about trend analysis, near real-time data. I think our industry suffers from not having access to those things, even though the technology is available to make those things happen. And so to your point, I think as credit unions, we have to absolutely embrace, and to all of your points about having the executive suite really understand how to utilize the technology that's available. And part of that is educating ourselves and learning about what is the latest and greatest available out there.
Question here.
Hi, good morning. My name is Scott Sadler, MAPS Credit Union Chief People Officer. I feel like there's conflict sometimes with the pace of digital and how it outpaces our ability to plug into the human side of our business. At MAPS, we're a mindful organization. We use mindfulness. We have cohorts. We do a lot of communication. I feel like digital sometimes gets ahead of that. We're not seeding the garden early enough to allow people to adjust to change. And that includes our executive suite, which is usually our biggest challenge. How would you approach that balance with EI and digital in that kind of scenario?
It starts with the strategy. And if the strategy is solely on digital, then that's the road you're going to go down. You're going to have people who are creating really cool stuff that maybe nobody's asking for and you don't know what the benefit is. So you have to create space for the conversation in the beginning before you even get to the point of, hey, what new tool do we need? And we're really good at this in credit union land. Let's go buy that shiny, cool product and put it in, and then our members are going to be happy. And before we go down that path, where's the conversation of how is this going to impact them? What is this going to be like? Have we walked through it as them yet in this space to see what that looks like? Do we know what they're going to feel when they go through this experience? Creating space for that conversation is something that hasn't historically happened in our industry, but it needs to. When that first conversation comes up, which is usually at an executive level or it's being brought up, hey, we need to do this thing. As executives, it's our job to say time out before we go and look at something, before we go and demo something, before we go and see something. What is the benefit that we're trying, not the technology. The technology shouldn't even be discussed yet. What is the benefit we're trying to bring to our membership with this? And have a real discussion about that so you can actually visualize that. You can picture that benefit before you talk about the technology. And then you have the conversation about technology. And that way you can make sure that you're not getting ahead with digital solutions because you have to put those thoughts first.
Which requires emotional intelligence.
As a former Amazonian myself, your number one leadership principle is obsession over the customer. So as you're selling technology into credit unions, how are you translating that obsession into credit unions passing that on to their members, where the credit unions are using your technology to obsess over their members?
So that's a great point. So we have 15 leadership principles. The first one is customer obsession. And it even extends a little bit and talks about how we pay attention to the competition, but we obsess over our customers, right? And we have a methodology working backwards. And it's very similar to what Chad's been talking about, the outcome. We start, what is it that we're trying to do, work backward. And so when we work with credit unions, that's primarily what we do. It's like, what are you trying to do? Well, I want to go into the cloud. Why? What are you trying to solve? Well, because I want to create a better member experience. Why? What's wrong with the experience you have? Right? It's lots of questions. And you'd be surprised how sometimes you start down that path and it's like, okay, well, that's exactly not what, we don't want to do this, we want to do that. So we focus a lot on that. We have programs directed and geared to leadership teams, board members, C-suite, around building a data strategy, around learning how to innovate, right? Your CMO and your COO should know, and your CFO should know what innovation looks like from beginning to end. They should be part of that workshop. And finally, we are very much focused on the idea of the member experience. We formed a team because we understood, for credit unions, because we understood that they were not like financial institutions, right? And so myself and about another 11 individuals, we are the credit union team, and we're focused solely on credit unions. So that's how we try and deliver those values and those mechanisms.
Last question here.
Again, Gary Brandt, and we're launching a new CUSO members mobile. So my experience has been in telecommunications for 40 years. And I guess I would ask the folks in the credit union space, if they looked at their database, how many landline phone numbers do they still have in their database for trying to contact their members versus their smartphones? And it really starts with the smartphone. Everybody has moved and companies have been slow to respond. So all the digital talk, go to a soccer field in the evening and watch two parents communicate seamlessly for transitioning their kids, heading them off. They're doing it with a smartphone. Everything has gone to the smartphone. And the businesses have been really slow to respond. And all the efforts to put apps on the smartphone, they're struggling because the adoption rate and the usage rate is 20 to 30%. It comes back to the people. The people have made their choice.
Was there a question in there, Gary?
No. No, it really, the question started off with what percentage of the credit unions are still contacting their members as if they are in their kitchens?
Probably all of them. No, it's one of those things. Credit unions, I think, have been slow to manage and utilize our data. Now we're getting better, but definitely, I think we have some emotional intelligence. I think the challenge is that it's overwhelming. Right? There's a ton of data, and people have been saying for years, consultants have been saying for years, I mean, why don't you tap into that amazing database that you have, because you know where your members are spending their money, you know what they're doing, but it's an enormous amount of data, and frankly, it takes more than just a software that provides dashboards to be able to understand and recognize what to do with that data. So at Lone Star, we start off with a question. Let's ask a question, and then let's use data in order to try to determine the answer to that question so that we can move forward. And it ends up becoming a little bit of a rabbit hole. You go this way, and then you start moving this way and that way, and pretty soon you're really far down into the rabbit hole. But I think using emotional intelligence to analyze the data that we have continues to be a challenge. We're getting better, but to your point, I can tell you probably we have a lot of wrong addresses and wrong phone numbers in general in our database.
2 quick points on that. I think data governance, data cleanliness is a big issue, and I think at all of our credit unions, we still have many landlines in our databases. I think a big thing that we need to do is more of these panels to show that data governance and data cleanliness isn't one person's job. It's not a department's responsibility. It's an entire credit union that needs to get on board, starting with how we collect data at the teller line, all the way through how we display it on a screen. The other thing is, I think we're lucky where we are today with technology that can sit on top of legacy infrastructure and really help us use even bad data to do really cool things. So I think we need to attend more meetups and talk with fintechs and CUSOs to see how we can make that happen.
And I like to tie up a couple of questions that came up. The single biggest asset that I've learned over the last couple of years that credit unions have, and in this climate even more so, is trust. It's invaluable, right? One bad experience with an app, you lose trust, right? And so I understand the apprehension. I understand that's why the importance of raising the digital IQ. I remember from when I used to work in restaurants that one good experience in a restaurant, you only told 2 individuals. One bad experience was 8. And I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty confident that that would be a very close one. So the idea of, there's this concept and there's this phrase in Italian, it's festina lente, which means hurry slowly. And I think of credit unions being in that stage, right? They got to hurry slowly, and that's why the importance of raising that digital IQ so that everyone can make that decision together. And can I drop the mic?
Yes. What an excellent way. Let's give this panel a round of applause. Thank you, guys.